I think so. Pretty sure all the things that are supposed to be making noise are making noise. All the things that are supposed to be muted are muted. That looks right. There's my screen. That's not the right screen. Let's put that away. That's the right screen. Maybe. Well, this is something I started a few weeks, no, months ago now. Is this our third month? October. I think so. This is another talk to teachers on video games and to students on some related books. My name's Wesley, and what used to be Signum Academy on Twitch is now Talks to Teachers. So if you are out there, teachers and students, and you'd like to talk about video games and some related books, we're here. It's the second Monday in October. It's rainy where I am, but I've got the window open because I feel like I need to just see the outside at least a little bit today. So if I'm glowing a little bit, I apologize. My cat is also here. He might try to climb on this keyboard any moment, so I'm trying to kind of restrain the cat. Um, but today I think we had in mind to talk about EarthBound. I'm pretty sure it was EarthBound that we were going to discuss today, coming out of our conversation about psychology. That's where the Talks to Teachers title comes from, the Talks to Teachers by William James. And then talking about literacy and power, the power that teachers have, the power that we can use to help or to hinder our students. Um, I think that that conversation led us into considering the ways that video games are connected to literacy. That's my reconstruction of the events, anyhow, that lead us to this moment here. Um, and I wanted to find my little YouTube video because I can't actually stream um, off of my Super Nintendo. I have not got that set up, but I have in the past streamed straight from YouTube. So let's try that again here. Um, EarthBound playthrough. Let's find a good EarthBound playthrough. I think this is the one that I used to watch. Nintendo Complete. That sounds promising. All right, I'm going to unmute it. Oh, here we go. Cool. I guess that's pretty darn loud. I'm sorry. I really can't figure out the technology here. I'm going to try to move us along here into early parts of this game. All right. So this is EarthBound. I think this is showing up for you okay. Early in the game, you set out on a quest to find your neighbor's little brother who's lost. This is a very minor kind of introduction to some of the main mechanics, and actually it turns out some of the themes of the game. As you're exploring, you're away from your parents. That's you in the middle of the screen there, of course, Ness in the red baseball hat. Um, you're traveling on a journey with friends, although this friend turns out not to be so trustworthy. And you're trying to save someone else, in this case his brother, but turns out later, the entire world, of course. So you have your basic um, generic, I guess is a good word for it, in the root sense, right? It's to the genre of the role-playing game um, of that era, the mid 90s on the Super Nintendo. This, of course, is a localization, that is a translation and adaptation for an American audience of the game that's released in Japan as Mother 2, the sequel to Mother on the Famicom, which was never released for the Nintendo Entertainment System outside Japan. There's a lot that we could delve into with EarthBound. I've talked about it at some length in other places, but what I'm really interested in here is just the theme of literacy. Um, Given that this is a game which we are going to interact with mainly through words, it turns out that literacy is pretty important for it. And I don't mean that in the sense of the game being about reading or um, intended to teach people how to read in any direct way. I just mean that partly because of the technology and partly because of the kind of experience that the game's trying to convey, we do end up thinking a lot in terms of the written word, not the spoken word so much, but the written word. Um, Now this is complicated or maybe simplified, I'm not sure, by the fact that Ness, in the keeping with the genre, um, is a silent protagonist. He is conceived of as not speaking in any very specific fashion. He has to move through the world and represent the character, um, the hero that is, the player um, character. He doesn't end up vocalizing anything except for a couple of very small exceptions. Uh, Instead, he becomes a kind of stand-in for the player. And if you played this game growing up, you might have experienced it a little bit differently. That is, you might have been playing with friends or watching someone else play. Um, but that character of the silent protagonist um, allows for some interesting interactions with the game on the part of the player. The first long bit of text that we get here is coming from our alien from the future. Let's get that here. Now that we've found Picky, Pokey got scared and ran away. We find out the truth. And we're going to head home now. All right. Picky joins. Do you hear a buzzing that sounds like a bee flying around? Yes, you can hear it. Maybe I'll turn it up again so you can hear it. A bee I am not. I'm from 10 years in the future. And in the future, all is devastation. Gigas, universal cosmic destroyer, sent all to the horror of eternal darkness. However, you must listen. Where I am from, there is a well-known legend that has been handed down from ancient times. It says, when the chosen boy reaches the point he will find the light, the passing of time will shatter the nightmare rock and will reveal the path of light. You see, it is my opinion that you are that boy, Ness. This I believe. Gigas Monster's plan must have been set in motion somewhere on Earth. If you start to confront the enemy immediately, you may have time to counter the evil intentions of Gigas. 3 things are of the utmost importance: wisdom, courage, and friendship. Legends of the ancient times tell of 3 boys and a girl who will defeat Gigas. I will tell you more later. Did you listen to what I told you? Thank you for listening to my long story. You are as exceptional as I expected you to be. Got a little bit um, behind as they were scrolling through that text. And the way in which the player interacts with this story is very simple there. I'm sure you noticed it. Uh, it's a yes or no question. And the function of that yes or no is to allow you, if you got confused, if you wanted to hear it again, to reset that bit of dialogue from Buzz Buzz the bee that is not a bee, and it would replay exactly what we just saw. Now, at a certain point, the buzzing of the bee transitions into a kind of mystical music. We don't actually hear the bee at first. That's triggered by Pokey. And I find that really interesting that Pokey, of all people, is the one to point out that something strange is happening here. Uh, he is an important piece of this adventure, although he's not going to stay in our party for very long. Um, there was always a tendency, I think, for kids playing these games. This is all anecdotal, but I'm sure you experienced something similar where you just would click through and scroll through the dialogue as quickly as possible to get on with the game. Um, Nobody used to say it, but nowadays people would say it was too long and didn't read. But the very same sentiment was there from the beginning. And this doesn't just happen in video games. Of course, people reading books will often skim over sections, let your eyes kind of pass over it without really engaging with it. And that's fine. That's within our rights as readers. And I think it's good that people play these games in a way that they want to. There's a kind of openness that the game provides in this example, because the default answer to the not bees question is a yes. If you just are clicking through the dialogue, you'll automatically click yes and move on through, and it'll scroll through the text that you weren't reading in the first place, or that you were sort of letting your eyes pass over. Now, if you're carefully reading it, I think it's also fair to assume that you'll choose yes. You probably don't need to hear it again right away, but like a great book, this is a game that really repays replaying, or if you like to think of it as rereading. And that's how I think of it. Um, I think there's something valuable in playing the game, actually sitting down and playing it. I think there's something that's lost when you're just watching a video or just reading or talking about it. Um, but I think that if you have played the game at least once, or at least have a decent memory of it, of watching someone play it in person, I do think that's a different experience. And I think that that sets a good foundation for then simply reading about, talking about the game thereafter. And so I hope that's the case for anyone out there listening. But if you haven't played EarthBound, I can't recommend it highly enough. So where does this leave us? We've been reading through, we've been set on our adventure, part one, I guess we could say, of the call to adventure here. And then we're going to move along. Now there's a major spoiler here. I'm going to try to not spoil it, but sorry if this is the first time you're seeing this. Okay. Now as we're leaving, oh, nope, sorry, already happened. This is a little before we're leaving Pokey and Picky's house. We get another long story from Buzz Buzz. I was much weaker than I thought, so you must now begin your adventure. See you. Oh, I just remembered. Listen to my final words. To defeat Gigas, Your own power must unite with the Earth's. The Earth will then channel your power and multiply it. There are 8 points you must visit. Make these places your own. Each of these locations is your sanctuary. One of them is near Onet, is called Giant Step. Go there first. Do you understand? Yes. You are a very intelligent young man, and oh, the pain. Everything is getting dark. Gasp. Before I pass on, I want to give you something. It is the Sound Stone. You can record the melodies from your sanctuary locations into this stone. It is an awesome item. By the way, I'm almost gone, but did you want to hear the story one more time? No. Good. It's already dawn outside, but it doesn't matter to me. I'm fading fast. Gasp. And then you got the Sound Stone. All right, and then this player chose to go up the steps and check on Pokey and Picky. So did you notice what was different about that one? In this example, there are 2 points at which the player is asked for some input. And again, our silent protagonist, that input is very minimal. It is a yes or no from the player that is conveyed. We can imagine Ness nodding, I guess, if we like. So we have to choose yes first. Yes, we understand. And then we have to choose no second. In order to proceed with the game, we have to tell BuzzBuzz, no, we don't want to hear the whole story again. If you're just clicking through, of course, you'll click yes both times. It's the default option, and you'll get the long story again. And so in this way, although it may seem like a minor thing, I really do think EarthBound is teaching the player to read. And I don't mean in the sense of learning how to read the alphabet or anything like that, like we saw with Frederick Douglass last time, but reading in the more metaphorical sense, in the sense that we also saw with Frederick Douglass last time, where reading is becoming synonymous with freedom, with the ability to determine yourself and to move about freely. I know that might be a stretch, but I really think there is a liberatory quality to learning to read, and just as much in playing these video games. I think there is a powerful freedom that comes in playing these games and playing them well and thinking about them. It may be partly because in these games, and I mean these classics, the imagination of the player is engaged to a pretty high degree, to a greater degree, I guess, than in games with better graphics and more realistic gameplay or whatever. Uh, because so much of it is in the form of reading, I think there's a quality of imaginative engagement that really does develop certain human potentials that, again, we're just using reading as a sort of shorthand for in these conversations. Um, we're going to move on a little ways here. So we're going on our journey. We're exploring the mountainside. Let's skip ahead a bit. Getting cookies from enemies. Talking to the local animals and people in town. Reading signs. I like that sign a lot about the flowers. And then eventually we're going to come to, oh geez, is this it? Oh, no, not that one. I'm not sure what's going on with this sprite in that picture. That's really, really strange. Okay, if we find ourselves at the cave, I guess we've gone far enough. So past there, oh, that was it, that was it. All right, here we are. It's just a rumor about that big footprint. Okay, so after exploring town, gaining some levels, all that good stuff, we come to this shack. This is between Ness's house and the mountaintop where the meteorite was and the town. This is kind of the other bit of exploration we can do. Um, And you'll notice there's a sign that says pretty clearly, don't enter. All right, and then there's another sign that we can't actually see what it says until we get up close and read it. So let's go up and read it. The shack was locked by someone from City Hall. A punk named Frank may have trashed the place. What a drag. Hotels are too expensive. Do not enter. Okay. Traveling entertainer shack. The door's locked. But we've got a key. Got a key to the shack. Let's use it. The door opened. All right. So in this example, and I know this is, again, a really small point. This is something that I find really interesting, though. Did you see something strange that happened there? You can put it in the chat if you're here with us, but I don't know that anyone is right now. I think we're coming up on the time anyway. So when you read the don't enter sign, it turns out it says do not enter. So what's going on there? Is Ness parsing the phrase and interpreting don't enter as do not enter? Is it that the words don't fit on the sign, so they had to just write it as don't, but what they really meant was do not enter. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a slight slippage there. And even more powerful is the fact that although Ness can read it, although the player can read it, in order to progress with the game, in order to go on your adventure and save the world, you've got to ignore the sign. You've got to actually, maybe more strong, um, putting it more strongly than that, you've got to disobey the sign. You've got to go directly against what the sign says, and you have to enter. Um, Now, this is classic in video games. You might think of Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, where in order to proceed, you've got to cut down the sign that's in your way, and then you can crawl through the little hole, right? Um, you might think of Wild Arms. What a great game for the PlayStation. There's a point at which there's a sign in your way, and the sign says something like "No blowing up signs," right? And so you use your bombs and you blow it up. Um, Now, in this example, um, there is a consequence. In the Earthbound case, this could just go sort of by without making any more fuss about it. But it turns out that somebody is going to enforce this do not enter. It turns out that the police in Onet, the name of this first town, the police are very keen on roadblocks and do not enter signs. And you're actually instructed to go to the police station after you emerge from finding your first sanctuary, the giant step. The next step on your journey is to face the police force, um, because of course you trespassed. There's a kind of beautiful moment then after you face the police force, um, in which you can talk to the police chief again, and it turns out that he has been playing Earthbound and he's finding it pretty tough. Um, so there's many ways in which Earthbound is self-conscious, thinking about the genre, thinking about the trope of the silent protagonist, and so on. Um, that's kind of an extreme example where someone in the game is playing the game that he's in. Um, but I think again that all of these are cases where the game is drawing attention to itself, is asking the player to think about it, maybe just in a funny way. Um, but when you do think about it and you see the kinds of slippages, the kinds of tension that we have between the written narration that sets up and gives meaning to the events of the game, and then the actual gameplay itself, um, the kinds of interaction that the player can have. I think that we really do learn to read in a new way by playing this game or games like it, games from that era. which, as we said, they demand a certain amount of imaginative engagement from the player. They don't make you think about them, but they invite you to think about them. And if you don't think about them, if you're not really reading them, they will have a few jokes at your expense as well. Um, this, I think, is what makes games like this really worth replaying. Um, they're great to play and not think about and just play and have fun with as a kid, but they certainly repay revisiting later on when you are a little bit more conscious and self-reflective. Now, that does bring us up to pretty much our time. If anyone is out there tuning in, watching, checking out the Talks to Teachers, I'd love to hear from you if this series has been helpful or thought-provoking in any way. Um, if you've played EarthBound, if you haven't played EarthBound, let me know. This brings us to a kind of a crossroads. We've now had our psychology kind of background for the series. We've had a really nice, I think, example in Frederick Douglass, and then connected that here to EarthBound. So we've done a kind of arc within this whole project of talking to teachers about video games and to students about some related books. The next book that I had in mind was going to be from that same era, from that early period of research into education, um, long predating video games, of course, but dealing with other kinds of games, and that was actually Jane Addams, uh, her writings, her essays, and her autobiographical writings related to Hull House in Chicago. I was thinking of connecting this with some of the work of Studs Terkel, um, a little bit more recent in the 20th century anyway, and then coming up to more of a contemporary game uh, in a game like Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley, one of those sort of neighborhood town type simulator games. Um, that was where I was thinking that we'd head next, talking about community, talking about how we learn not just reading on our own, but reading in community, playing games in community. I hope that sounds interesting for you. But again, if you've got other thoughts, I'm happy to hear them. Um, for now, take care. Enjoy the rest of October. We'll be meeting again first Monday of November, and we'll be diving into Jane Addams, Hull House. I appreciate y'all listening and look forward to seeing you then. So take care. Gotta find